Alright, if you're coming in for the first time now, this video is the third and, thank God, final part in a lengthy examination of Cyberpunk 2077. If you want to start from the beginning, I'm putting a link up on the screen now, and I'll stick another one down in the description. In the first video, we talked about how Cyberpunk 2077 came to be, which was a mess, how it feels to play, which isn't great, and the context of obnoxious and deceptive marketing and unwelcome behavior by studio leaders. In the second, we talked about the core story, which I was really impressed by, if not perfect, one of the more competent and thematically powerful game stories in its class. So, if you've gotten this far, the impression you might have gotten is that Cyberpunk 2077 is a great narrative straining against the technical limitations of the game it's made inside. That's not an uncommon fate for open-world games. That's Sleeping Dogs, that's Fallout New Vegas, and that wouldn't be bad company. And when we talked back in the first video about the argument that Cyberpunk just needed 2 more years of development, that's the narrative that argument serves. Unfortunately, it's the opposite of the problem. There's way too much Cyberpunk 2077, and the further you get from the core story, the worse it gets. Not universally. When we talked about the endings last time, I skipped over a major twist during the Arasaka ending. Yorinobu was secretly trying to destroy his father's company from inside, and your efforts prevented him from doing so. I skipped it because it undermined the main themes and because it was, in my opinion, catastrophically misplayed. It should have been treated as an irony rather than a twist to work at all. There is some power in the Arasaka ending. It clarifies that you've been selling yourself piece by piece to someone who you always knew wasn't going to pay you back. But it's drowned with a pointless twist and a lot of meaningless lore. More to the point, the emotional weight of all of the endings are poorly suited to the fully open world, which explicitly encourages you to stop right before the endings, to spend 10 hours cleaning up side quests and hollowing out the game world. Nevertheless, at least one of the endings consistently, I had to play them multiple times to get these screenshots, consistently had me on the edge of tears. That's a shock in a game that, beyond the main narrative, is rarely expressive and is often clownish. Hanging over Cyberpunk 2077 is Cyberpunk 2020, the tabletop RPG that the video game licenses. The instinct is to kind of dismiss that as an effort to take ownership of the word cyberpunk. They're advancing the timeline 50 years so they can fudge the setting and explain away all the differences, right? Well, no. Characters we spent a long time discussing last time, Johnny Silverhand, Rogue Amendiares, Alt Cunningham, and Kerry Eurodyne, are characters from 2020. The quest I described, how Johnny died and Alt ended up in the net, that's the box adventure. Though, yes, the video game tells it way better than the tabletop game does. The level of reference is weird and, in my opinion, unfortunate. The entire period between those years has been filled in with lore. Recognizable characters reappear constantly. Much of the game world, Night City and its surroundings, is closely adapted from 2020. I'm confused by the decision not to scrub away the lore, a decision I think it is really only explained by authentic fanboyism. A fanboyism that's weird to see a mega-budget 2020 product have for a badly imperfect and very niche tabletop product from 1990. It has all the pitfalls of setting a game on Coruscant or the Sword Coast, but there's no vanguard of free marketing that you're giving fan service to. The setting isn't well suited to a video game adaptation, and, to be blunt, after looking 2020 over, the best you'd say about it is it's an essentially functional system to run a cyberpunk tabletop game in, and until recently that was pretty rare unless you were willing to branch into fantasy or, in the 2000s, take a shot on the D20 system. Among other serious issues, it's drowning in lore, obsessed with aesthetic, and largely misses the sophistication of the critique that's in the things that it's emulating. None of this is unusual for a small, old-school tabletop game. Indeed, in a tabletop game, you're able, even encouraged, to discard much of that. You're really playing your own version of the game based on the couple of campaign hooks and mechanical elements that are relevant to your game. But 2077 isn't your own version of the game, it's a fully realized open world implementation. So all the issues that you'd sideline on your own are instead exacerbated. Night City is basically a fictionalized Los Angeles. Yes, technically in a different part of California, with its own lore. Still, basically a fictionalized Los Angeles. The fictionalization gives a little authorial leeway. If you, say, end up depicting your character as fighting a largely Latino gang that controls territory across much of the city, it provides a level of cover. But on top of that is decades and decades of lore, completely irrelevant to the core story, all of which needs to be realized in the setting. That's not great in general, but it also works against the tech-noir storytelling, in which the anonymity and vagueness of the city are key. Layered on top of that are choices CDPR wouldn't make, or that reflect unfortunate realities of game development. Like, V's apartment is supposed to be a shithole, but it isn't. It can't be cramped because open-world movement controls don't work in cramped spaces. It's the first recurring location where the game can impress you with its ability to render an urban panorama, so the view's pretty solid, not much worse than what you'll see from Kerry Eurodyne's Hillside Mansion, or Arasaka Mansion, or a luxury hotel suite in Arasaka Tower. There's a decent bed, a good shower, a good entertainment system, even a second room set aside as a workspace. It's better than most apartments I've lived in. The one gag that does work is there's no kitchen, just a vending machine. Much of the setting just doesn't seem to have been worked through. V's apartment is in one of the numbered mega buildings that dominate Night City's landscape, but I couldn't tell you which corporation owns or builds them. This kind of concrete behemoth has similar influences to what Cyberpunk visually builds from, but it usually tracks more to ideas of totalitarianism and bureaucratic decay than anything this game is handling. In the recent patch, a system to rent additional apartments, presumably originally intended for Cyberpunk Online, was added to the game. This is a common feature of GTA-style games, and one that fans demand it, so here it is. An apology. One more thing for completionist players to buy after they break the game economy. But they just mean V, as her few weeks to live turn rapidly into days, is renting second and third and fourth apartments in the same city. Worse, they represent V in a story and setting explicitly about financial oppression, transforming herself from indebted and broke to clearly well off over the course of a couple of weeks. Control of the streets of Night City is divided among its gangs. I do like the implication, occasionally suggested but never foregrounded, that the gangs are functionally co-opted by the corporations. I like a couple of the gangs. The Animals, a gang of bodybuilders hopped up on hormones and muscle-building drugs, are a good comic take on the gang's themes, with their obsession with transforming their bodies into a totally useless, unhealthy, aesthetic form of perfection. There's 6th Street, a militia of jingoistic veterans who claim to be protecting neighborhoods from gang violence that they're, at best, just an equal part of. And there's their constant claim that bearing the scars of pointless wars entitles them to authority. But then there's the Tiger Claws, a pan-Asian gang modeled on the Triads, or maybe the Yakuza? The gang doesn't seem entirely sure, for whom every design decision is a dull stereotype. There's the Voodoo Boys, a Haitian and Dominican gang that use the cover of voodoo practice and the insular Haitian and Dominican refugee communities to conceal a sophisticated drug manufacturing and hacking operation. We talked before about River Ward, an NCPD detective in one of the romance options. The setting offers no reason to believe the NCPD would employ detectives. We encounter tons of murdered people. Crime scenes are an hourly part of V's life. They seem to be an hourly part of the lives of most Night City residents. Not one crime I encountered outside of River's quests is ever investigated, and nobody acted as though investigation were a part of the game world. We're told NCPD isn't even a police force, it's actually a PMC that used to be a police force, and all you see them do is get into shootouts with gangs, though there are so many gang members, wanted dead or alive, standing around on street corners that I have no idea why NCPD even does that. I don't know what NCPD does in the setting at all, to be honest, nor who's paying for them to exist. Even though the game prominently features sex work and people call each other by all sorts of gendered slurs, I can't tell if sexism is supposed to be a thing in the game world. Even though the gangs are racially coded, I can't tell if racism is a thing in the game world. Even though there's a trans character I'm going to talk about in a bit, and even though there's all that transphobic advertising, I can't tell if transphobia is a thing in the game world. Sometimes the setting looks at the wealthy and sees them as the people who victimize the rest of the citizens, and sometimes it sees them as slightly more comfortable victims of global systems of power that have grown beyond anyone's control. These are both reasonable directions for a story like this to go, it just can't decide. At its most coherent, the game's indictment of the very rich extends as far as perhaps a dozen people, and everyone else, whatever their wealth, is largely an innocent victim of the 0.000001%. I can't begin to describe how oversexed the attitude in the game is. There is an omnipresent, salacious, playing at adulthood mentality that works in sharp contrast to and consistently undermines the core story's efforts to wield the sex industry in critique. It's in how hard the game works to make sure you see and customize your character's naked body in what is, to be clear, a first-person game. It's in how hard it works to give you at least 2 and potentially 4 or more explicit sex scenes with different partners. It's in Sir John Fallistiff, the comically oversized dildo I mentioned before. It's in the in-game advertising. There's no way to talk about how oppressively omnipresent the advertising is. I only have one gag to try to pull in that regard, and I'm about to spend it on something else. So even describing it, even showing you pictures, I will not be able to convey it, but here, there's the ad for an alcoholic beverage featuring a naked, overweight man presenting the bottle over his crotch, while an attractive woman draped over his thigh looks on adoringly. There's the Sasha Devon 3 Mouths 1 Desire experience. There's the ad for Wet Dream, the ultimate sexploitive experience featuring a nearly naked androgynous model being orgasmically fondled by hands of light. There's the ad for Mr. Stud, a cybernetic replacement for your penis, so you can go all night long. There's the ads for Midnight Lady accessories, which feature replacement breasts in a variety of licentious forms. There's the ads for the only show it seems like anyone watches, Watson Horror. I'll get to whether these ads should exist at all in a second. The first thing is that even as satire, and it kinda is satire, all sense of proportion has been lost. They are badly in need of looking at some reference. Go somewhere like Vegas and see what a sex-obsessed, corporate-operated culture looks like, because they're not close. It just loops around to that GTA Saints Row thing where they make everything incredibly horny, but give the 13-year-old boy playing it an out, an excuse that nobody's buying. No, Mom, you don't get it. It's a parody. Where there is ambient storytelling in Night City, most of it is overwhelmed by, hey, look at these tits. That makes it embarrassing to play, embarrassing to be seen playing, and difficult to recommend. Let's talk about what they're trying to do, though. Remember way back when I said we were going to talk about this quote? Here we are. The core argument the setting sets out is that a social focus on the corporal alienates us from our true selves. This is what the animals are doing. This is why the voodoo boys use religion as a front for a cybernetic, drug-induced transcendence. This is why the in-game advertising is so sex-obsessed. This is an old topic in cyberpunk fiction, and it's one that cyberpunk has been moving away from, because it goes some pretty fucked up places, like the places it goes to here. Here, it frames cosmetic surgery, prosthetics, any kind of body modifications, and really any kind of positivity about sex as evidence of decadence. At its least inept handling, this idea brushes against that thing that really works in the core story, the consumerism selling you a facsimile of the physical experience while denying you the real experience. But this far from the core story, the writers and designers aren't that careful, and end up being shitty to the people they claim to be talking about, the people for whom prosthetics make daily life accessible, the people for whom cosmetic surgeries make them able to feel dignity in their bodies, the people whose sexual liberation help them explore their own identities, the people for whom surgery, prosthetics, and sex may be profoundly enabling. This casual shittiness, for the sake of saying, look at all the boobies, permeates the game. It makes it difficult to give CDPR credit for things that in isolation would seem broadly successful successful or at least like earnest gestures. That shittiness makes me feel like they didn't include a same-sex and opposite-sex romance for each of a male and female V because they wanted to be inclusive, but because having tried to make a game by and for assholes, they realized the budget didn't make sense unless they sold the game to non-assholes too. This ad for the high-end fashion, cyberware, and weapons brand Avante in isolation might not play as much, but in context it implies that two women being attracted to each other is evidence of social decadence. You meet war veterans whose military cyberware can't be removed and prevents them from fully returning to civilian life, and even though there's more generous framings, the setting is so routinely shitty that it's difficult not to read it as an argument that veterans with prosthetics are psychically doomed by their injuries, unable to live full lives. Remember the now infamous soda ad, the one which features an apparently trans model with an erection? That was defended as, in context, actually clever social commentary? Well, in context, that social commentary is an argument that that person's existence is evidence of social decadence, and I want no part of that. It makes it hard to give credit where credit is due. One of the best realized characters in the game is a trans woman. Her name is Claire. She's the bartender at the Merc Bar Afterlife, but she likes street racing, or she did until it killed her husband. She asks you for help. At first she tells you to win races, but eventually she explains that she really wants revenge. All you need to do is choose to follow her husband's killer off the race path during the championship race so you can finish him off. It's not hard, and I didn't mind doing this for Claire, who is realized as an independent and forceful person who treats V like a person and just needs help doing the one thing V is best at. Then, with the job done, she walks out of V's life. She lets V keep the car, her beloved car, because she's done with it now. I admire the way that Claire used V to get revenge, the frankness of it, the way that once it's done, she says unapologetically none of it had any other value for her. The game hints that there are options to talk Claire out of her revenge, but I couldn't square it. V's a killer. Like in Watch Dogs, it's technically possible to be fully non-lethal, but the game frames V as a killer, and the game systems are intended to make being a killer fun and engaging. Being a killer is V's social role, so when Claire said she wanted revenge more than victory, I had V go with it. That's what V does. And when Claire walked away from racing, from her car, and from V, I respected that. I would have liked my V to have known Claire better, to become Claire's friend, but that's not really what Claire wanted. But it's difficult to give the game all that credit because, in a meta sense, Claire feels, airdropped in when someone realized that some people thought their social arguments were shitty, solely for the purpose of providing an out from any real-world applications. You can't say we're shitty, it seems to say, we've got Claire. In much the same way as in Watch Dogs, there are two Vs. Core Story V is desperate, scared, and determined. She's run out of options, so she's attempting the impossible. She's highly capable and goal-driven, but her home's a mess because she doesn't have the time or the energy to clean. Core Story V is kind of an idiot, but earnest. Relying on the assistance of others, as she has left her with an understanding of the kindnesses one owes to one's loved ones. She wants to help. As a protagonist, I really like her. Open World V is a hardened murderer, and most of the way to a psychopath. I want to be clear, I'm not making the normal point about how games have narratively sympathetic protagonists that in the gameplay kill a lot of people. I mean, when you are in the open world doing minor quests and encounters, narratively, V is a trained state-licensed mass killer. Her economic function in Night City is to see four people playing dice on the street and leave their bleeding, hideously dismembered bodies behind her while she counts the automated deposit into her bank account over and over again. It's a combination of narrative elements and design failures. The bugs and the lack of activities compound the fact that what activities and minor quests there are mostly very similar. Every time you wander out of a side quest, a big one or a minor one, you're out in the open world now and there's only one kind of activity nearby. In one of the side quest chains, a fixer named Regina Jones asks you to stop, preferably non-lethally, people afflicted with cyberpsychosis, which is a condition in which a person's neural integration with their cybernetics malfunctions, leading to violent insanity. I've talked about this chain before. It's the one I largely completed using the comically oversized dildo. This is one of the only times the game can notice you've made use of non-lethal options. Once, after working really hard on Regina's behalf To take one of these people alive, the game pointed me at a reveal that he'd known his cybernetic implants were malfunctioning, but as he needed them for his construction job, his boss wouldn't let him stop using them. Eventually, he had a psychotic break and murdered everyone at his workplace. I texted Regina about what happened, and she thanked me for keeping him alive. Then, standing in the middle of the bloody, tragic wreckage of this horribly broken man's involuntary killing spree, V texted her back, saying, quote, "Guess even pneumatic arms can't lift morale in a toxic workplace." There were no other conversation options. Regina didn't respond. That's okay, neither would I. I wouldn't talk to me ever again, but quest complete, time to go shoot some gang members. These ones are apparently bad because they robbed a Militech convoy. My V robbed a Militech convoy like 10 minutes ago, but that was different. That was narratively driven. I never did learn what was happening with these ill people I worked so hard to not quite kill. Regina said something about a therapy, but I never learned what that meant. The game otherwise treats cyberpsychosis as untreatable, with exactly one exception. I encountered a Militech officer who seemed unusually excited by action and violence. I later learned, by text message, that she had suffered from cyberpsychosis and then her mind had been forcibly reconditioned. She'd been transformed against her will into a loyal corpo operative, placed into a department in which her mania was useful to the corporation. Though they don't explore it at all, that could be a powerful idea. But it doesn't seem in character for Regina, who hates corpos. But it's the only context the game provides for one of the longest quest chains in the game. In a quest totally unrelated to that chain, Regina asked me to track down some stolen meds. I found them taken by a man struggling with cyberpsychosis-induced paranoia, who'd come to believe the meds were poisoned. Trying to convince him to give the meds back, V accidentally drove him to suicide. Regina, the fixer desperate to save people with cyberpsychosis, calls to thank you for getting the meds back. She never mentions the suicide. Time to go shoot some gang members. These ones are just hanging outside the MILF guard, as you do. These kinds of problems can be exacerbated by bugs. Once I was tasked with rescuing someone and, optionally, also retrieving her van. I got her van, and she thanked me for getting it, but she wouldn't get in. So I drove the van to the next quest checkpoint, and she teleported along behind me. The quest giver blamed me for not getting the van I'd just gotten. Fine. I reloaded a save, got out, drove the car around a bit. Nothing. I checked Reddit. This was a known bug. To fix this, what I did was I drove the car through the woman. It's fine. She doesn't have any collision, so you just go right through her. But if you quick save while she intersects the car and load that quick save, it loads her with collision, which the game interprets as her getting run over. That's fine too, she's immortal, but getting run over resets her pathfinding, so if you're lucky, she'll get into the car. This kind of problem is common and rarely progression breaking, but the need to constantly Google for solutions is immersion breaking. That woman seemed to have an interesting dynamic with the fixer who hired me, but I was too busy fixing the quest to track what was going on narratively. She never showed up again. It made the fixer like me enough to unlock another car to buy. Not a car I wanted, though. Quest done, time to go shoot some more gang members. Earnestly, I can't tell you what to do with the quest Cuckoo's Nest. A policewoman who uncovered something is involuntarily committed by the NCPD to a psychiatric hospital. Her husband hires you to break her out. You can try to sneak through one of the most heavily guarded places in the game world without sending up an alarm even once, or you can do it by murdering the hell out of basically every doctor and security guard in the entire hospital. You find out it's a place where people are involuntarily committed for the purpose of isolating them from their loved ones, then tortured into insanity so they can never really return to society. It's the kind of quest that might make you go, that could work, if you do it very carefully. In Cyberpunk, it's basically the backdrop for a 3-minute Doom level. You crash through the hospital, leaving a trail of severed heads behind you, doctors and guards and probably a few innocent people caught in the crossfire, and you realize they didn't want to tell you a horror story. It's not a rumination on the interlacing network of oppression, corrupt institutions corrupting each other. It's the fastest way to give you permission to kill all the guards and doctors in a digital psychiatric hospital. You never find out what the policewoman uncovered, who she scared, how her husband was planning on protecting her from the literal police. You reassure her that she's safe now, even though, obviously, she isn't. Then she gets in the Uber your fixer called. That was a weird 3 minutes. Time to go shoot some gang members. A lot of side characters end up being tiny parts of such a sprawling game. Characters who speak to the setting often get no more than a couple seconds of characterization. Characters that seem key to V's life are present for one side quest, or if you're lucky, one side quest chain, then vanish. In the opening montage, V is taken in by Jackie Wells and his mother, known as Mama Wells. Jackie becomes V's chum, and Mama Wells becomes a surrogate mother figure. By the end of the montage, V has moved out into her own apartment. Jackie mentions her 2 or 3 times, I think. After Jackie dies, Mama Wells organizes a ceremony to memorialize him. It's a nice little sequence. Jackie used to be a Valentino, so the leader of the Valentinos, currently in prison, sends someone to read something on his behalf. I reconcile Mama Wells and Jackie's grieving girlfriend here. She seemed like a great recurring character. I never saw her again. On the other hand, there'll be a fixer like Dakota Smith who gives you quests in the Badlands region. Objectively, Dakota is one of the characters I speak to and see most across the whole game, but here is literally all I ever get of her. She's apparently a Pomo Native American, though I'm not sure where I heard that. At some point, she mentions she might have lost her family. She's affiliated with the Nomads, but she mentions that she has a title indicating that she stays in one place, building a support network for nomads to use when they come by. I think that support role is looked down on by other nomads. That's it. And that's squeezing blood from a stone. Virtually every character in the game is ancillary like that, whether a random associate or a close friend. A couple of lines of dialogue, do their side quest, walk away, go shoot some gang members. There are so many short quest chains I haven't discussed. They're mostly pro forma and rarely contain interesting ideas or connect directly to the main themes. In the few that do, they're usually let down by exploitative and mishandled execution. There's a quest called Violence that features Grimes playing a pop star named Lizzie Wizzy. It's supposed to play into this ongoing discussion of celebrity culture, which, like the sex industry, the game wants to use to talk about manufactured experiences. Like Sky, in the main quest, there's a level of interest here in the person who allows their body to be used as the vessel for that consumerist facsimile. But where Sky has made tough choices to survive, Lizzie, much like Jackie, bought a dream that the world is selling her. Unfortunately, it's all so poorly executed that it lands in a confused muddle of, did you think this was good? Likewise, there's a quest chain involving Joshua Stevenson, a murderer, who had a jailhouse conversion and has agreed to have himself crucified so that others can experience his faithful martyrdom in first person as Braindance. Once again, there's this idea of the commodification of experience, in this case, very literally spiritual experience, and this question about the person who chooses to be a part of that, who sells out, really, because they have some feeling that they're desperate to share with the world. But once again, it's so badly executed that I really only have to say, as brought to you by CDPR, to make you immediately shudder. And yes, after both of those quests, it was, well, quest over, time to go shoot some more gang members. In V's own words, come on, we've got places to trash. If the open world part of the game communicates one thing effectively, it's that death in Night City is cheap. People die, everyone moves on. Their lovers, their families, their friends. Nobody matters. It's a nihilistic representation, sometimes as critique, sometimes as enactment, except sometimes it isn't. Sometimes you'll kill 10 people to save one. Sometimes you'll work hard to kill no one. Sometimes you'll kill dozens to save yourself. Sometimes you'll kill 3 people having a barbecue in their front yard. Pure nihilism doesn't quite fit because occasionally it wants you to care. I guess that's not so different from, say, Tomb Raider, but then Tomb Raider isn't specifically investigating thematic questions of the value of a human life and the alienation of humans from each other. The wider Cyberpunk 2077 opens the aperture, the stupider its answers seem. A huge problem is that the game wants me to believe that Night City estranges people from each other, but it just doesn't. Sure, Night City honks the same way Vegas honks. It overwhelms you, not just with fakeness, but with how tacky that fakeness is. But it's not oppressively alienating. Everyone you see enough to have an opinion on. Johnny, the Welleses, the Peraleses, Misty, Vic, Judy, Claire, Rogue, even V herself. Night City's absolutely fucking them all up. But socially, they're all fine. They have authentic friendships, authentic camaraderie. The food sucks. There's few green spaces, but the game ends up halfway there, constantly talking about this thing that's important to the story, important to the game, important to the genre, but not really depicted in the game world. When Joshua talked about how necessary his crucifixion was for the people of Night City to experience real beauty, real faith, and real love, I'm not there with him. Not because I disagree with his plan, but because he's factually incorrect. But the strongest idea in the setting, the thing I find most interesting, is the depiction of the waste of it all. So much discussion of corporatism indulges the mythology of capitalist efficiency. Cyberpunk 2077 is noticed that in the corpo state, no one picks up the trash. None of the corporations clean up anything. So many of the strongest spaces in the world are built on this. A half-constructed highway abandoned atop the landscape. A massive oil field left to rot because oil just isn't worth it anymore. The city's only green spaces overrun with uncollected trash bags. The memorial at the old Arasaka Tower kept clean-ish, but relegated to a spot to take business calls in. My favorite of these is... okay. Saul, the leader of the Aldecaldo nomads, is considering offers to be bought out by one of the corporations. Times are hard for the nomads, who bleed a few more lives after every engagement. Because they steal and take merc work, they're regularly the targets of more well-resourced groups. If you took the nomad background, something similar happened to your own nomad clan, absorbed into a larger one, split up until the identity was gone, like sand in the wind. But you don't need that context to know it's a bad idea. Saul's concerns are real, but the corps are selling him giving up, dressed up as opportunity to placate his self-respect. After a mission with Saul and Panam, you'll take shelter with them in an abandoned farmhouse. Saul and Panam used to know the owners, who took a buyout from the agribusiness Biotechnica and had to move into the city. Did Biotechnica plan at some point to do something with the property and it just got lost when some corporate strategy got reworked? Or someone got promoted or fired? Or are Biotechnica just so obsessed with monopoly that they buy up any arable land they can find, not to use, just to prevent anyone else from getting the tiniest sliver of their market share? This is a great place for Cyberpunk to visit the destruction that corporatism leaves behind, not to generate products, not to optimize anything, just byproducts of faceless strategies that'll be replaced by other faceless strategies tomorrow. It's the part of the world design I find most satisfying. It brings much of that design together. It takes those ideas, the manufacturing of experience, the substitution of public relations for conversation, the crushing of culture under the weight of mass-produced kitsch, and it delivers the killing blow. None of it is even for anything. It's all just waste. All of that leaves Cyberpunk 2077 in a strange position. In some important ways, it really is interesting, daring, and smart for a AAA game and for a Cyberpunk work. It's a thoroughly interesting, unusual work. It takes the anonymity and irrelevance imposed by a corporate system-driven world, that Cyberpunk staple, and extends it to the psychic wound that irrelevance imposes on us. The psychic wound that doesn't really have a response, and asks what that wound does to us. It occasionally stands head and shoulders over a AAA game industry that thinks, with some reason, that straightforward but expensively told power fantasies, movie plot ripoffs, and dad stories constitute a renaissance of game narrative. If there's an argument that fully cinematic approaches and tools will let video games tell stories to rival the masterpieces of film, Cyberpunk 2077, by no means a masterpiece, may be the only game I've played to really advance that argument. It's broken, not just buggy, but not really, from a gameplay perspective, engaging, but games like Fallout New Vegas or Knights of the Old Republic 2 are cult favorites because when those games fail, which is often, you understand that their hearts were in the right place. Writing checks their budgets couldn't cash, and extend them some grace, just as I am a 30-cough blowhard who says the wrong thing a lot and relies on you to extend me some grace. By contrast, when Cyberpunk 2077 fails, which is also often, it feels like the reason it failed is because the people who made it are assholes. It's hard to extend grace for that. The first time I wrote this was a section about where CDPR goes with Cyberpunk from here. I talked about, what their goals are and their financial situation. Where I landed was that CDPR's position with investors, with customers, and with their own employees probably required going back to The Witcher and licensing a more widely used engine, but they might also continue work on Cyberpunk 2077, trying to get it to a state where it would eventually be possible to sell a Cyberpunk online. Of course, I can't prove I thought any of that before they kinda just said it out loud. So CD Projekt's public position now is that they're making a new Witcher game in Unreal, but their new model is making two AAA franchises side by side, and while Cyberpunk Online is cancelled, they're planning on having online live service elements across all their future games. That kind of leaves you with two possibilities. One, which I think is more likely, is that messaging is kind of a head fake to keep up team morale and investor confidence until they're ready to move staff over to the Witcher project, which might well not be for a couple of years, that we'll get a couple of DLCs in the intervening time, and then the project will quietly vanish. The other is that it's for real, and we're today part of the way into a half-decade redemption story for Cyberpunk 2077. Perhaps the next story DLC will come with a re-implementation of one or more major mechanics, say a completely new driving in-car customization system, paving the way for racing activities. A few DLCs like that, maybe they can sell a live service sequel with all of those features. Would that be a grand redemption story? I'm sure if it happens, people will want you to believe that. But those parts aren't the parts that were great, they're the parts that were mean and hollow. Unfortunately, the compelling narrative, those compelling ideas, aren't just attached to a broken game, they seem attached to just assholes. Sentiments and modes of expression that are just shitty. A reactionary, edgy, and outmoded mentality, not omnipresent, but pervasive, that makes it hard to credit the game with its successes. If you play it, there's a chance you not only won't like it, you'll despise it, and despise anyone who does like it. And that feeling will be fair. When Cyberpunk 2077 hits its A game, that A game is really something. But much as I wish Cyberpunk 2077 were a better game, or on that A game more often, I don't think tinkering with game systems and adding a few side activities bridges the distance from here to there. It might just be, hoping someone else does it better.